We'll be discussing the role of civil society in promoting democratic good governance, among other developments in the country. So in the studio, we have the Executive Director of the Institute for Governance Reform, IGR, Andrew Lavalie, and William Saolamin, Executive Director, Accountability Now. Gentlemen, good morning and thanks for joining me in the program today.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
When we have political conversations, or sometimes when it's not even about politics, developmental issues, and you have a civil society representative in the studio, sometimes in the comment section you'd see people referring to evil society. Oh, they're part of the problem in the country. Let's first of all get a baseline to understand what's the role of civil society in every nation. Andrew, please.
Thank you very much. I think it will be useful to know what is civil society in the first place. People think civil society is Andrew Lavalie, it's Saolamin, it's Marcella Sambasise, it's Ibrahim Tome, but it's way bigger than that. You know, the preachers that stand on the pulpit are civil society. In fact, at a point in time in South Africa, the biggest voice of civil society was Bishop Desmond Tutu. So in traditional settings, say for example, when you look at Bondo society, when women come together to bring society to order, I mean, that's civil society. So you have the traditional sense of civil society, and then they have a formal sense of civil society. But normally, we divide the work of civil society into two. We have what they call gap fillers, institutions that actually complement government, and then we have oversight institutions, institutions that hold government to account. And people normally feel that every civil society does oversight. There are those who actually do gap filling. You can go to a community, people need water, you help the Ministry of Water Resources to dig water well. And then you have another institution that actually bring government to order if water is not provided. And sometimes you have some of these roll into one organization, but too often it's good for them to be separate. For example, for us, we look at democratic accountability, we look at service delivery. I don't know whether you paid attention to the work we did in 2015 on the census, the work we did in 2021 on the population census, the midterm census. We realized that between the two regimes, Sierra Leone spent about $24 million just on two censuses. And both parties said, no, we don't want this. So you need civil society that will be in the room. You look at the national statistics structure, different committees to civil society to ensure that the right thing is done. And then you need civil society to go out again and then to critique. So there are many things that civil society does in a democracy. So if you look at the National Elections Watch, for example, so there are many things that NEW does in a democracy. So you know that there are logistical constraints for elections to be held, to be conducted, for the results to be out in matter of hours. What NEW does is to take a sample of the results and then just to make a quick tally to give some heads up to the Electoral Commission that this will be the nature of the result that is coming up. So whilst they do that to support the Electoral Commission, they also hold the Electoral Commission to order. So they oversee the Electoral Commission by looking at the electoral cycle and then tracking processes. So in many ways, it's the same with the Center for Accountability and the Rule of Law. They do research, they support justice delivery services, but when it goes wrong in the court, we expect Carl to step out and then say, this is what, I mean, so that's really different from market women. So you have groups that are clear interest groups. For example, the Sierra Leone Teachers Union. They are meant to defend and protect the welfare of teachers. The Bar Association is largely an association of lawyers that are meant to defend and protect the welfare of lawyers. And same with the Medical and Dental Association. So you have those organizations that look at the welfare. Of course, sometimes when you look at Bar Association in other countries, they issue what we call, there are legal bulletins that looks at the performance of the legal systems in other countries. Some, in fact, even provide legal assistance, like legal aid in other countries. So there's a diverse configuration of civil society. It's difficult to pinpoint what what every civil society does. But to your question as to why do we have a situation where the moment someone speaks, then you introduce someone in the studio, that is evil society. It's clearly understandable. And sometimes when people are in your position, you feel so angry, you want people to say the things that you want to hear, not necessarily the things that will make the country better off. And so normally they monopolize grievance and they want you to flow in that grievance. But the role of civil society is not to go in that flow. The role of civil society, A, to complement government, B, to correct government, not to replace government. The institution that replaces government is a political party. So civil society is actually between the state, which is politics, and citizens. So you actually defend citizens' interests. So you are not private sector, there is private sector, there is a state, and there is citizens. So it is largely citizens' interest. The moment you start doing business with your work as civil society, you are not civil society. The moment you take partisan political positions, you are not civil society. So sometimes it's good you leave politics to politicians, you leave APC and SLPP to banter their banter in parliament. In fact, if they do not do it properly, you step out to say, Parliament, you're not doing what you want. You are just approving appointees of government without proper scrutiny. So there's quite a lot that civil society does. And civil society is not Lavalie, it's not Marcela Sambasisi or Saul Amin. Civil society could be all of us.
Almost all the civil society activists in the country, you would find people who would say, as you mentioned certain names, that's APC, that's SLPP, or that person is this, that person is that. It seems they've all been branded. And there are some who would say that person is APC, but someone else would look at that same person and say that person is SLPP. Someone else would come and say, no, that person is neutral. William Saul, I mean, how have we come to a situation where CSOs have been labeled to political parties?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Andrew have said it all, and it is always the case that people will label, individuals or organizations.
But haven't there been some of your colleagues who have given perhaps a justification to people to label them?
I know what you're saying, and it's not just about civil society. We also have it amongst journalists, the bar association, and all of that. For civil society, I always say this. You have the real civil society, you have the bread and butter civil society. There are civil society we know, they have been bankers a few years ago. Few years later, they are journalists. And they cannot make it. And in few years, they will come back and say, I'm civil society. The next moment, they are politicians. If they do not succeed, they will come back as civil society. So we have those civil society. Civil society, William Saul, I've been doing what I'm doing as an activist. This past April has made me 28 years as an activist, not a politician. I've never made an attempt to even stand for a position as a councillor, not to talk about a member of parliament. But we have some of these guys who will be here today, and the other day they will be over there. It happens even within the politicians. You will see some people there today, SLPP. Tomorrow morning they will be APC. The next day they will be NGC. So they are all over the place, not just amongst civil society. But what we are saying, the people are the best referees. They can do exactly who is the bread and butter civil society, who is the real civil society, and interestingly, our work. Those in politics, like the APC, they will want at any given time, if Saul Amin is on media, to say what the APC people want to hear. Likewise, the SLPP. Today you say something against the APC will say Saul Amin is SLPP. Today you say something against SLPP, they will say, oh, that man is now APC. That is the way they have labeled us. But what you have to do as an activist, you have to be focused in whatever where you are doing. You have to do, our main focus is what? We monitor, we advocate, we sensitize. And let me tell you, sometimes if you want to complement the effort of government, This is part of our role as civil society. You complement the effort of government when there is need to complement the effort of government. There is no way there is Ebola in Sierra Leone and the government wants to do some certain activities that has to do with Ebola, and then you say, no, I'm civil society. It's because it's a time of SLPP or APC, so I'm not going to be part of it. No. You complement the effort of government, more especially on advocacy, sensitization, and monitoring, you know. And then by so doing, you are complementing the effort of government. And that is what some of us have been doing over the years. The next moment, the other political party will tell you, oh, that man belongs to that political party. Like for the APC time, Saul Amin was all over the place, sensitizing, advocating with people, monitoring the free healthcare, which was brought by the APC government. I was all over the place, not only at district level, at chiefdom level, moving around, educating people. Because that pronouncement was made by the former president at PCMH Hospital at Fobe College, that we are providing free healthcare for lactating mothers, children under 5, and pregnant women. That was the end. People now started going to the health facility who are not within this category of people. So as civil society, you have the responsibility to educate the people. Number one, you don't go to private clinic for free healthcare. You go to government facilities for free healthcare. These are the category of people. You cannot see an 8-year-old man going to a health facility for free healthcare. So you educate people, you sensitize them. I've had several town hall meetings, you know, having 1,000, 2,000 people in that meeting, using musicians, the Wahidi, CJ, the Uberi, and others. After the performance, each of them, and then they will send that off, a very short message. In that hall at that particular time, you have 2,000, guests. All of them will take the news to the house. So within a day, you've been able to cover over 6 or 7,000 people.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Saul. I started off on that footing, so we'll get a baseline to understand, first of all, because it seems as if people don't understand in Sierra Leone the role of certain institutions or individuals. So because there's lack of knowledge, there's misconception on what the person or institution is meant to even be doing. So now that we have established what CSOs are and what they do, let's look at the role of civil society in democratic good governance, Andrew.
So there's quite a lot that we do. So so the role of civil society in democracy is, first and foremost, it's to promote accountability, to ensure that democratic norms are being enforced. Because in a democracy, normally people measure democracy by elections. But democratic governance is way beyond elections. It's what happens between elections. So, for example, you have to make sure contracts, there is fair access to contracts, there is fair access to scholarships. You have to ensure that there is fair access to justice. So it's those diverse configurations of activities that happen between elections that's always civil society oversees. So that's why you can have some CSOs focusing on elections, some CSOs, as I said, focusing on justice. So too often, like in the case of IGR, we collect data, and the data we always use that to inform governance processes. So, for example, we conduct public opinion polls, and when those polls come out, those polls, you know, normally reflect the views of citizens. Say, for example, what the citizens feel about corruption, for example. I remember publishing, you know, a report on corruption in 2020, and you know, there was a lot of challenges at the time when citizens were saying in a pecking order of institutions, the police is the most corrupt from their perspective, and second is Parliament. And we heard that it was aired on BBC. Carl did the same, and then we had this tension with Parliament. So, but it's useful to note that we did not measure the success of civil society just by publishing reports, just by sitting on radio and television or places like this and blasting. How do we measure success? We measure success by the change we promote. So, for example, in the same year, 2020, we there was a report, this was in 2021, there was a report by IGR on service delivery that was laid in Parliament and debated by both the APC and SLPP. And the recommendations of that report were not only debated, were agreed and endorsed by Parliament. So civil society actually adds value. Sal was explaining the quality of work that they are talking about in healthcare. Not only monitoring healthcare, but the more you monitor the healthcare, you let people in the driving seat of policy understand where the gaps are and how to close the gaps. So there are many things that civil society does, but I think what affects us largely is the polarization. I think Sal was right to say, because of the massive polarization, people in Bo are afraid for a comeback of APC. People in Makeni, they do believe that SLPP is not their government. So because of that polarization, it does not only shape the work of civil society, it shapes the work of the media as well. So there are certain statements, the moment certain statements are mentioned, people think, they just personalize this information to say, you are not actually advancing public policy, but are in favor of this party or that party. But what we do, we advocate for things that affect all of us. So if a civil society is talking about a toll road, the price of the cost of the toll road contract, is not about SLPP or APC. It's the effect of that toll road on every passenger, that uses the toll road. It's the same as if we generate information on citizens' perception of corruption. If that perception is good, it doesn't mean because you are in opposition, you are angry, you should monopolize, and you've monopolized anger, everybody should be angry. So there are certain times you publish things that are favorable. In fact, there are some people that even doubt whether a survey was even done. No, it's these guys that just went at the back of their corners and then they sat down and then they wrote stuff. That's not how we measure ourselves. We measure ourselves by bringing out high quality data. If you look at the work that is done by the Budget Advocacy Network, so BAN has published quite a lot of materials on economic governance, and some of these materials have been taken and they have informed not only policy, but they have informed legislations. So there are many things that we do in civil society, some practices that have been taken up by government and adopted and are now part of the behavior of government. Say, for example, monitoring and evaluation. M&E used to be fairly and squarely a domain of civil society. Now it's been taken up by government. This is over years now. I'm not saying by this government or even by Kuruma. But M&E, monitoring and evaluation, it's started in the private sector, became embraced by civil society, the non-profit. Now it's being embraced by the state. So there are a number of practices that we do that the states emulate and adopt. When we did the Service Delivery Index for health and education, it's a report that was signed by the then Minister of Education, now Chief Minister David Senge, and of course Minister of Health, Dr. Austin Demby. So they both saw that the work we are doing is in line with the Health Information Management System, Education Information Management Information System, the EMIS and the HMIS. They said, no, these people are not against us, but they really want to see how they can promote accountability at the community level that will bring maternal mortality down, that will bring infant mortality down, that will promote learning, improvement in learning.
In Sierra Leone, what's the nature of the relationship between civil society organizations, and this is not just a one-off thing, generally the body of civil society organizations and the government?
So first and foremost, it's useful to understand that civil society they are not monolithic. They should not be one and the same. They should represent diverse interests. In fact, it's that multiplicity of voices that's the richness of democracy. Saulami and I, CGG and IGR, Carl and BAN because they are not working on the same thing. In fact, their temperament and visions are different. That has to be respected. So in fact, I think the challenge we have is not just on the part of government, but on the part of many shades of opinion, is the tolerance, is the intolerance we have for alternative views. So instead of people actually, challenging your viewpoints, they go behind, say, who is Phoebe Swill? She must be from Moyamba. Moyamba is an SLPP area. So they brush you, they tie you with that brush, the green brush, so without engaging with the content that you are generating. So too often we see stakeholders not engaging with the content that people generate, but they try to do this, what they call labeling. So they smear you, and in the end, the institutions are meant to remain the same, because what we do is to hold society to order. So for example, if you look at the opposition, the role of opposition in many countries, in fact, the opposition and civil society should be working in partnership, because the opposition holds government to account, civil society does the same. The opposition and the media should be working in partnership. So, but in the absence of policy direction, say for example in healthcare or in justice, the more you have the opposition talking about the rule of law and justice, straight off you have institutions like CAL aligned with them, because the vision that they are preaching is the same thing that CAL was established to do. But if we have this situation where these institutions, they go to parliament, they collude, and then you expect civil society to be on the side of any political party, it will be difficult. So what we want political institutions to do is everybody to have the fair share of their own role, and you just play your own role. If you are a ruling governing party, you have to provide scope for the opposition to thrive, and if you are an opposition, you have to give policy direction. It will be useful to ask, how many times have you actually seen among political parties a policy position on a particular issue? Right now we have passports. The cost of passport is one of the most expensive in the region. How many times are we getting, political actors in parliament actually critiquing the passport contract? Toll road. How many of you know your vehicle maybe uses the toll road almost on a monthly basis, and data is generated on the vehicular traffic? How many Sierra Leoneans are actually clear about the cost, what is the revenue being generated by the companies managing that? So it should be, it's not just a matter of civil society, it should be a matter of opposition actors as well, trying to bring some of these things to the fore. But the more you have interest groups in politics colluding, and they only become divided over ethnicity and regionalism and over elections, and not over what should be the direction of the country, when that happens, the work of civil society becomes very difficult, if not impossible. So we now have a situation where what people normally do is just to tag, without actually talking about the substance, but to tar people with certain brushes, sometimes that did not belong to them.
Andrew, I'm going to read you this brief but very apt explanation, not to use the word definition, of what good governance is supposed to be. So, good governance is the responsible and effective management of an organization or country where decisions are made with the needs of society in mind. Having this in mind as the context for good governance, how would you assess the work of the current government in the area of good governance?
So there are many facets. You cannot have like a magic bullet, say, this is what government is doing on good governance. So if, for example, when you have the MCC, they have 20 indicators. Because good governance, you have a number of indicators. In fact, the MCC just boiled it down to 20 indicators on the Millennium Challenge Corporation. So for example, you can look at the quality of elections, you can look at the the quality of the media, the freedom of media.
Andrew, sorry to interrupt you, but I was very specific and, intentional about reading you that explanation of good governance before asking you that question. I'd read it again. It says, good governance is the responsible and effective management of an organization or country where decisions are made with the needs of society in mind. Using this context, assess.
No, definitely. So you said decisions are made with the needs of the people in mind. So clearly, what do you call the needs of the people? The needs of the people are in education.
Responsible and effective management.
Yes, responsible and effective manner. The needs of the people are in education. The needs of the people are in health. The needs of the people are in even who governs us, that's elections. So you have many things that are packaged in that sentence. It's quite loaded. So when it talk about responsible, so when you say responsible, it can be many things. It can be fiscal responsibility. How do you use their resources? It can mean policy responsiveness. How is this policy responsive?
Let's zoom the lens on fiscal policies for a bit. Our economy is a hidden secret, is not doing very well as to be doing. Currently, as we speak, the USD versus the Leone is on another level. In the black market, it's about 2,420 leones for $100. A few months ago, it was less than that. It got to a point we thought it was stable, and then it just flipped over the last month or so, and it's there. We still have a situation where there's a banter on the president's traveling and spending of state resources on traveling opportunities when, you know, there are other things some would say require that money to be spent on. Zoom the lens on fiscal policies.
So definitely, so again, there are two issues in that. In the first place, it's good you ask, what are we producing? Because when you talk about exchange rates, I think the biggest way to assess exchange rates is output. Because when you generate and export, then your exchange rate becomes stronger. But the question is, what are we producing? So it really begs the question of producing. You're right on the question of
we already aren't producing, but the meager resources we have.
Yeah.
How judiciously is our government utilizing it?
So that's another issue. I mean, the question you mentioned, the question of presidential travels. It has been on the lips of many Sierra Leoneans that our president is traveling so much. It's not just in this current tenure, but even in his first tenure. So there have been a lot of concern about presidential travels, and of course, those concerns are legitimate given the cost of flight, including private jets, the cost of private jets. If you ask State House, they will argue that we can do a cost-benefit analysis as to what is coming in response to that. But the question is, the question you will ask, we haven't done the numbers yet in IGR, but the question you will ask, will some of these benefits come without the president traveling? So, for example, if you won the MCC 480 million, which is really quite sufficient to offset most all of this travel, we would have gotten the MCC without necessarily the president traveling. So it's good for us to have a balance sheet. It's something we have not done. So it's quite a debate, but the fact of the matter is, from what you read, having the citizens, the welfare of citizens in mind. So it's always good for us to assess. At any time there's a movement, what is the cost of that movement? And what are we gaining from that? Not just presidential travels. You look at embassies abroad. You look at embassies in the US, embassies in the UK. What are they bringing into Sierra Leone? What is the net benefit of establishing an embassy abroad? What is it bringing in? I think the good news we have is we've for the first time, we've now have the performance contract of ministers open to the public. So when you say, you know, acting in the interest of citizens, it's really about how are those contracts implemented? What is the value for money? But I think the biggest thing which is a fair critique coming from many citizens, is value for money consideration in the in the exercise of governance.
I'll come to you, William. You're from Accountability Now. Let's talk about accountability. And an elephant in the room on this area of accountability very recently is the Auditor General, former Auditor General, Lara Taylor-Pierce, who this whole conversation boils down to accountability. It started off with an investigation, checking to see receipts that they said, because we had an exclusive interview with Tamba Momo, who said they saw these receipts to be suspicious and they needed to fact check them. Fast forward to where we are, a tribunal, and here it is. We have some organizations together on one accord calling on Parliament to look deeper into that. But accountability now, what's your perspective on this accountability aspect? How the government went from being friends of Lara, sort of like a fan of her work, to now being an enemy of her work, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems we are facing actually has to do with our constitution. The constitution, the issue about the constitution for me is so key that I was even expecting the previous government to actually have done something. And even the current government.
How is the constitution a problem in this case?
They have a link, because there are some certain clause in the constitution that will give so much power to the executive to take some certain decisions, right? And these are the areas the politicians will always find that loophole, to capture that loophole and then make use of the loophole. And when some of these things happen, what will happen? The opposition, the politicians, the opposition side will now want to take civil society to be at the forefront, taking lead in that particular discussions, leaving those clauses in the constitution that the president or whosoever is using against another organization or against an individual, which is also legitimate because it is there in the constitution. So what we are saying with the issue about the Auditor General's office has to do with so many other institutions, like even the judiciary. There are issues or there are clauses in the judiciary that will give power or mandate to do some certain things. You look at it that this is all right.
William,
but when you get to the constitution proper,
William,
we also tell
William, let's take one step away from the constitutional issues and look at, before even, you know, there would be a concern that would lead the president to get his team to say, check the constitution and see what powers I have to address XYZ. But again, from Accountability Now perspective, how do you interpret, Lara Taylor-Pierce was the Auditor General for years. The reports that predicated the GTT reports that led to the commissions of inquiry were reports done under her leadership at the Audit Service Sierra Leone. This government sang praises of her work, even in opposition, used it as campaign messages that mass corruption going on here and there. Upon victory in office first term, they used it forming the GTT report. You would find it's referenced there as, you know, one of the sources they got information. We had commissions of inquiry, all on this leadership that was there. Fast forward to this leadership now probing into the office of the president, which clearly the office of the president is not just the president. There are human beings who work for the president. There are things that no president, even the poorest nations in the world, president would not do by himself. There are people who render those services to the presidency. But now investigation into the office of the president, not the president, led to all this back and forth to a point where we are right now, that the professional body of accountants released their own report not long ago saying they had done their investigation and as per their standards, there was no professional misconduct.
Thank you.
How do you interpret this situation?
Mind you, civil society, we are not judges. We are not judges.
But civil society has opinion on issues.
I agree, and some civil society are raising issues. You can agree with me, as my colleague rightly said, that we have CSOs who are doing something on justice.
Yeah, yours is accountability now, isn't it? It is, right? Accountability now.
Yes, now,
okay.
Even if it is accountability, we have limitations. In what we do.
How? Why?
I don't go and make arrest. I will say few words. I will make comment on some certain issues. but I'll not go and make arrest.
William, I'm not asking you to arrest. I'm asking you for your assessment, your opinion. What are your thoughts in this situation?
Yeah, I'm not going to judge and make a statement whether it is 100% right or wrong. We have institutions that has to do their own work, and we'll look at the work at the end of the day, and then we can make our comments and suggestions and all the rest of it. You are talking about Lara. Before this time, the current government was saying this is the best auditor general. Now, what can you say about the judiciary and the police when the former government was saying we have the best police officers in this country? When you go out to the UN, they will tell you Sierra Leone police officers are the best. When they were in governance. When they are not, they will tell you we have the worst police officers. So today, somebody will tell you that Lara is the best auditor general. And the next moment, that's why I'm still emphasizing on the Constitution. The next moment, somebody will say A, B, and C. And the parliament is also more very powerful than even the civil society. I will tell you, for any country that is great or small, has to do with the parliament. If we are talking about the office of the Auditor General, I'm really expecting that the parliament should have played a more key role than even all civil society. Because we can raise the red flag that this is not right. And at the end of the day, the government will say, no, this is what we've said. The judiciary have come out with their report. XYZ have come out with their report, and so therefore we are pushing. So you will make some comments, and I will tell you for free, some CSOs are causing a lot of noise about the report from the Auditor General's office. But what can you do at the end of the day? You have limitations. You talk, you raise up the red flag, and that is all you can do. You understand? Because even for you to demonstrate, they will tell you how procedures and processes. And maybe you will be on that planning for you to be given the approval for demonstration, and then sometimes you get frustrated and just forget about it. So what we are saying, we want to see our institutions actually working. If we are talking about Auditor General's office, the report that has to do with Parliament, that has to do with the judiciary and other institutions, we want them to stand tall in their office. So at the end of the day, you see things coming up. You go to the US, yes, we cannot compare ourselves to the US now. But when you talk about the judiciary, the president do not have much to do with the judiciary. They are so independent in doing what they are doing. Maybe if it was Africa, by now, Donald Trump should have been in the prison 4 or 5 years ago. But because the judiciary is so strong in America, they have been doing what they are supposed to do. The president has not been dictating that he should do A, B, and C. Then they are doing their job. So here, most of the things, most of the problems we are facing has to do with that of our #1 document, which is the Constitution. We have so many...
I'll just quickly read out some of the messages on our Facebook page and give you a minute each to just respond so we don't jump into the wrong time. Idris Abundu is asking, who funds civil society? Mohammed Lamin Jallo says, the fact of the matter is civil societies are divided into their political interests. We don't need to trust none of them because they are not sincere in their dealings. They only consider how to make money. They forget that civil society world is not a place to make money. Samuel Weiss, he says, responding to Idris Oza's civil societies get funded. He says civil society funds mostly should come from international institutions that seek good governance and development in a society, not from government, particularly in Africa. Swissman says, I am smelling civil society money on William Saul. I mean, by his skin and dress, civil society money is part of this dress. Lord help the civil society in Sierra Leone. Fode Mustafa Toué says, the meddling of civil society in politics is the single factor that has discredited them. Andrew's clear support for the SLPP in the past 6 years makes his organization complicit in poor governance and living conditions, and that's the reason government doesn't take their recommendations seriously. Civil societies have to strictly be holding government accountable, like it is in the UK or USA. Government is paying a lot of money to people on their behalf. Government is paying a lot of people to talk on their behalf, but you see civil society playing that role in Salone. We know that he's a voter, but you have to make us guess which way your vote is going, but it's so clear. Mosdi says, yes, Andrew, the MCC is not considered by the president's travels. It is measured by the country's performance, especially democratically. Are you saying our ambassadors, high commissioners, consulates, and even our foreign ministers are all incompetent of carrying out the orders of president or government? Are they just being paid by the taxpayers for what? This of your assessment of government given the cause for people to think of you differently, rather to what your positions should be. Swissman says, William, Saul, Amin, and Andrew, can you please tell us about the relationship between your civil society and the government? Osfriend says, have you thought as CSOs to model a particular approach to address the rural-urban divide and regional polarization? Also, do you guys seek to know how to understand human behavioral patterns from a psychological perspective? CSOs are considered to be think tanks in certain political settings and thus requires an anthropological approach with a hint of technocrat input. When humans become uncertain, the brain attempts to choose a course of action which can deter development and peace. Too many messages here, but I'll have to limit it to these for time. In just a minute, gentlemen. I know it's unfair.
I know I know it's unfair, but the reality is people are all entitled to their thought. But the reality is, I always say to myself, what results am I bringing? That's how we measure ourselves at IGR. Some people want to measure us by the number of contestations we make, but the same things we did under the past administration, querying census processes, under this administration are the same things that we continue to do. And I just want to tell those listeners that civil society is a free space for all of us. They have the right to establish an organization, to be their own voice. So if you are not comfortable with Andrew Lavalie being your voice, you have the right to be your voice as well. So, but it's very easy for people to feel, to make you, to have this perception that this person is co-opted because this person is in the room, because they are not clear about what you say in the boardroom.
All right. William?
Yeah, I think you have your own view and I have mine. So the only thing I would say, people try to understand and accept what we are doing. Because over the years, when there was war in this country, some people didn't go out from their residence. Some of us have been traveling all over the place and making meaningful contributions for us to have a democratic state. And today, whatever happens, things are not okay. The economic situation is bad. That is just the fact of the matter. And the president himself is making such a statement that the economic situation is not really okay. That's just the fact of the matter. But we have to continue to stay as Sierra Leoneans and play our own little part, and that is what we are doing. As civil society does not mean that I should not wear this kind of cloth. Mind you, I'll be meeting with ministers, political parties. I will not be that awkward for me to meet with them. And people should understand that somebody is doing a particular job for over 20 or 28 years must be, having some kind of status now, Because at the end of the day, I have a school-going children. I have a son that is out of university. It's not working.
Thank you so much, William and Andrew, for your time this morning to be part of the program.